The worst war, I think, in the world probably today is happening in Europe. There's no other way to describe what Russia is doing in Ukraine.
Every family in Ukraine has been touched by this war. Every city, every village, every family.
Children living in Ukraine have to experience war every day. They hear the bombs. They have to go to air raid shelters at night. They can't have a proper night's sleep.
Думаю, сьогодні живеш, а завтра можете війні бути.
Розруку. Все, що за життя збирала, жила, нічого нема.
Звати мене Олександр, я головний судовий експерт. Ми працюємо в відділі вибухотехнічних досліджень, досліджень ракетної, артилерійської зброї. Основне завдання судової експертизи – це проведення експертизи. В нашому випадку це засоби ураження, уламки або вцілівші якісь зразки всієї номенклатури, які застосовують Збройні сили Російської Федерації проти України.
So first of all, we are in close communication and coordination with Ukrainian armed forces and with Ukrainian military research institutes that are finding the debris of Russian weaponry in the battlefield in civilian cities and are trying to dismantle them to identify the specific components of those weaponries.
The crucial thing for the military is getting the microchips, the metal working tools, the precise instruments, the optical parts, and so on.
Our experts analyzes all type of the weapons which Russia use against Ukraine in this war.
Вдається нам ідентифікація, що це була за ракета, що це був за безпілотний літальний апарат, авіабомба чи артилерійський постріл. На сьогодні більшість своїх електронних компонентів затирають фізично, лазером, замазують і якось скривають, щоб ми не дізналися, що це за компонент. Але якщо ми вже досліджували цей блок, я можу порівняти, і вона конструкція незмінна, тому ми знаємо, що це за компонент. Лазером заділено майже кожен елемент. Але ми бачимо, будова не змінилася, це була трошки пошкоджена, так?
During the course of 2022, they started to realize that crumbs, it is Western technologies which are raining down on the Ukrainian cities every night.
Every Russian missile fired at Ukraine contains components originating in the West.
Many of the Russian-made cruise missiles wouldn't be able to find their targets without the help of American companies.
That Western components are still fueling Russian airstrikes.
Russia is using Western components and technology to attack Ukraine.
So in general, we have identified about 600 components, different components in different types of weapons. The biggest manufacturer of these critical components for the missiles and drones, for sure, is the United States of America. But a lot of European countries has own manufacture of these chips. We speak about microprocessors, microcontrollers, flash memories.
Дані компоненти є дуже важливою складовою саме високотехнологічної зброї. А зараз у нас сучасна війна – це війна технологій, яка неможлива без використання сучасних чіпів, мікросхем, а також використання сучасного програмного забезпечення самої зброї безпосередньо і для її виготовлення.
Велика номенклатура стран чи країн, які виробляють чіпи, використовуються в засобах ураження, які використовує Російська Федерація.
When you find goods that exported to Russia, made into a weapon, and then they are found in a battlefield in Ukraine. That is very concerning.
При всіх грошах, які має Росія, вона не є високотехнологічною країною. Завдяки цьому мають можливість проводити свою діяльність. Тобто придбати те обладнання або ті предмети військового або подвійного призначення, яких дуже потребує Росія.
Dual-use goods, which can be non-military goods like washing machines, can be then dismantled and they are used for military purposes inside Russia.
You know, for example, they find a drone, a Russian drone that has a PlayStation microchip or something like that. So basically, it's a battlefield good. It's not directly war purpose, but it can be used, and it is used because we have evidence.
I'm sure that if these chips will not provide it to Russia, they will not be able to use missiles and drones.
The U.S. led the charge with American sanctions cutting off Russian banks from the global financial system.
The Russian advance has been met with universal condemnation and tougher sanctions from the West.
Sanctions were imposed on Russia. All of a sudden, it became illegal to export all kinds of things to Russia, to buy all kinds of things to Russia. So exporters, financial institutions, they were looking at things going to Russia or coming from Russia or the Russian nexus.
We believe that the sanctions is the only alternative to the weapons, and the sanctions have been the second best thing to stop Russian aggressions. We've imposed, I guess, altogether hundreds of sanctions rolling out. We've formed the sanction coalition, which is now about 40 countries. And we think that all the sanctions imposed against Russia have caused a lot of pressure on the Russian economy.
Western sanctions have been effective on curbing Russia's economy. Without sanctions, this machine really would have been very difficult for Ukrainians to stop.
So the mission of the Western-led sanctions on Russia are to restrict the funding and resourcing of its military.
Unfortunately, Russia has been adapting quite nicely to the sanctions imposed and been still quite able to acquire the necessary parts and critical components for the military industry.
We, as a foreign ministry, see the process when certain countries and entities are assisting Russia in its war effort and are helping them to get access to technology, to some dual-use components and goods, evading the existing sanctions regimes.
We recently see a growth of highly unusual trade flows between the European Union and certain third countries. These goods then end up in Russia.
Ми бачимо, що ці товари є тим продуктом, який потребує Росія і який вона отримує через ці країни. Мова ведеться про пострадянські країни, в тому числі це і Білорусь, і Вірменія. Росія у Вірменії використовує різні методи обходу санкцій.
Since the outbreak of the Ukraine war in 2022, Armenia has been one of the major hubs of Russia's sanction evasion networks.
We can see that after full-scale invasion, Armenia supply a lot of really important for Russia goods from Western countries. And we understand that it's not normal situation, but we understand that they have no any change in their economic situation.
Suddenly, out of nowhere, Lithuania starts to send electronics and some other things to the countries who are not, regular consumers of these sort of products. And so it was clear this route has been used for sanction evasion.
The Russians, for them, avoiding sanctions is existential. And so they will do everything they can. They will shapeshift to adapt their methods to get the kit they need in order to continue their war in Ukraine. There is unfortunately too much evidence still of Western components, Western machine tools getting into the Russian military supply chain.
Armenia is helping Russia acquire those sanctioned Western commodities which the Russian side cannot obtain otherwise. Some of these commodities end up in the Russian military industry sector. And the microchips or dual-use products, they are utilized by the Russian side.
Doesn't mean that Armenians are going to use their washing machine 3 times a day now, 4 times a day. These washing machines are going to Russia.
Before 2022, we didn't have a lot of exports of phones, monitors, computers, and washing machines, such things.
Therefore, increase in Armenian re-exports of certain high technology products to Russia was driven by Armenia's unique role as a pivot enabling Russia to receive high-tech technology, high-tech goods in order to sustain its warfare.
We've seen certain supply chains coming from Armenia to Russia and delivering certain not wanted items to the benefits of Russian military defense sector.
Вірменія, яка була і є союзником Російської Федерації, відіграє в цьому дуже важливу роль. Ці процеси фіксуються і робляться відповідні висновки.
Armenia is not the only country that helped Russia, but Armenia's role is disproportionate to its size and aspirations and scope.
Therefore, we can definitely say that Armenia is one of the central elements of this sanction evasion network.
How did this process of the re-export of goods of Western sanctioned goods to Russia through countries like Armenia take place, I think it's based on a long-standing links between Armenian and Russia.
Հայաստանը ցավոք շուրջ 2 դար է համարվում է ռուսական ազդեցության գոտի, թեև Հայաստանի անկախության հռչակմանը եւ ոչ միայն Հայաստանի, մյուս խորհրդային հանրապետությունների անկախության հռչակմանը Ռուսաստանը այդուհանդերձ փորձեց նորից ապահովել իր ներկայությունը, իր ազդեցությունը հետ խորհրդային երկրներում։ Որոշ երկրներում չստացվեց, Հայաստանում ստացվեց շատ խոր արմատներ գցել արդեն ռուսական կայսրության նոր, այսպես իրավահաջորդ Ռուսաստանի Դաշնության արմատները։ Ռուսաստանը իր դիրքերը ամրապնդելու համար ձեռք գցեց Հայաստանում գրեթե ամեն ինչ՝ էներգետիկ կախվածություն, քաղաքական կախվածություն, տնտեսական, ռազմական, բոլոր իմաստներով Ռուսաստանը իր ներկայությունը ապահովեց։
Armenia has 2 Russian military bases. Russian intelligence officers controlled Armenia's borders, and Russia controls Armenia's energy sector. So Armenia was de facto a Russian puppet state.
Armenia's international airport and border are fully or partly controlled by the Russian soldiers.
Росія має дуже амбітні плани. Її намагання відновити базу в Арменії є одним з кроків для посилення впливу в цьому регіоні. Ця база у Вірменії може використовуватися не тільки для оборонних засобів, але використовуватися в інших цілях, в тому числі і для прихованої логістики через цей логістичний хаб. В будь-якому разі можна сказати певно, що Росія не збирається віддавати своє лідерство в регіоні Кавказу і буде продовжувати робити спроби щодо зміцнення своєї військової присутності в даному регіоні.
The countries like Armenia are historically very close to Russia when it comes to trade, so they have cross-border trade relationships already. They might be also part of the Eurasian Economic Zone.
Armenia is part of Eurasian Economic Union with Russia and Belarus. This means that we export and import goods without tariffs, goods, services, capital, and workforce. So Armenia gained because it's part of Eurasian Economic Union.
I understand Nikol Pashinyan, maybe his heart would like this to end and move towards Europe, but his head is corrupt.
One thing is very clear. Months after the beginning of the war in Ukraine, Armenia made it very clear that this is a window of opportunity.
Происходит прям очень сильная интенсификация отношений с Россией. А вы не боитесь, что сейчас попадете под какие-нибудь вторичные санкции?
Ну, я думаю, что бояться не очень полезная позиция. Нужно работать, чтобы управлять теми угрозами, которые появляются, и попробовать не только заметить те возможности, которые открываются, но и поработать над тем, чтобы новые возможности открылись. Благодаря тем решениям, которые были приняты президентом России, правительством России, нам удалось вот эти угрозы управлять вместе.
If we look at Armenian dram, from the start of the war, Armenian dram has gained a lot. It's one of the most evaluated currencies in the world. It gained around 20%. This is huge. This is good for our government in the first glance.
There's a statement of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan that under the circumstances, Armenia could actually open doors for Russian companies to operate.
In 2021, before the Russia-Ukrainian war, the export of Armenia to Russian Federation was around $818 million. Right now, it's around 3 billion, so it has grown around 5 times. And if we look at European Union, so since 2018, Armenian exports to European Union has fallen by 5%. So that shows that we mainly export Russian Federation.
Seeing that kind of data, seeing that evolution of demand in those countries, that evolution of their trade with the European Union, we can say for sure that not the story about the development of their economies and their industries, that's the story about the re-export of goods via their territories to the Russian Federation.
Armenian trade with Russia has increased like 300-400% since 2022. That's nothing to do with the good Armenian economy. It's to do with helping Russia bypass sanctions.
%400 increase in just 2-3 years is quite incredible and cannot be explained by simple economic and trade reasons.
If you're sitting doing compliance at a financial institution like I used to, if all of a sudden your client in Armenia or another country is importing a lot more of a certain item that it used to, that should raise significant red flags.
We can see a lot of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles being produced in Russia. We see the increasing number of the Shahid UAVs attacking the city or the cities of Ukraine every other night.
Ось он, сіре, бачимо, це іранський, а це виробництво російське, але начинка ми вважаємо, що вона поступає з Ірана і вже збирається в Росії. Бачимо, що в іранських шахедах використовувалось дуже багато американських чіпів. От основний бортовий комп'ютер, тут основний чіп – це американський ДСП.
Iranian drones has the same components which is Russian drones. So they use also the components from the countries of European Union, United States, Japan.
According to Ukrainian officials, Armenia has been one of the transit countries which enabled the transfer of the Iranian-made drones into Russia.
Iran was very successful. I mean, the Shahid drones used by Russia from Iran against Ukraine, I don't know what percentage, but a very high percentage of the technology inside those drones are Western. So they were smuggled through various countries like Armenia to Iran.
Some of the Iranian drones that were used by Russia on the battlefield against Ukraine were found to be of Armenian origin. They're not made in Armenia. They were imported from the EU and China, and there's items, there's components of dual use, and then they were rebranded in Armenia for the purpose of being used for the purpose of those drones. So we see an incredibly complex picture here.
A lot of countries cannot export directly to Russia because of sanctions. So imagine the trucks that have a lot of electronics, a lot of phones come to Armenia, some trucks from Russia, some trucks from other countries. And the goods from other countries on the spot
are hauled from one truck to the other on the spot. And those go to Russia. And the paperwork is such that those products were produced in Armenia. But this is the case. So this is, in fact, re-exports. So the paperwork says that those products were produced in Armenia, so to circumvent the sanctions.
It's about enabling Iran send those military hardware to Russia to be used against Ukraine.
These links between Armenia and Iran, these sanctions evasion and security and other links, have been largely ignored.
This is a very sad reality because all of these money are funding Russia's war effort. And in the end, these are Ukrainian civilians who are getting killed, injured, and their infrastructure ruined because someone is making money on the war around the world. These are our people that are dying every day because these missiles and drones are still able to fly.
Мене звуть Галина. Проживаю, бо зруйнована квартира.
We came here because the war began. Our house was attacked.
Тут общежитие, 21 комната, 46 человек.
We can't sleep because the rockets are flying over us, drones are flying over us, shaheds are flying over us.
Постоянно сирени, постоянно тривоги, сюди летять ці шахеди, вибухи, ППО це стріляє, і цілу ніч тут того і розстроїшся, і не знаєш, куди діться.
Some countries support Russia. I only want to say them, stop supporting Russians with giving them weapons and stop to kill everybody.
Gold is one of the leading exports of the Russian side. However, it became subject to Western sanctions.
In the 5 years leading up to the sanctions, Russia's gold exports followed a clear pattern, consistent volumes delivered to markets around the world. However, sanctions disrupted this pattern completely, forcing a major shift in Russia's gold export routes.
Especially after its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, when there was a whole coalition of countries that united against Russia.
On Russia, there are a lot of sanctions, around 25,000, mainly in financial sector. And it is very hard for Russia to pay to other countries for goods and services. So gold in this case becomes a payment method. Armenia is the part of Eurasian Economic Union and as such doesn't have any tariffs. Russian business had options to export the gold through Belarus, to Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, but it chose Armenia. So at that time, around 90% of Russian gold
was going through Armenia.
Several Armenian and Russian companies also collaborated very intensively in order to evade the sanction mechanisms.
Last year, we wrote an article with my Armenian colleague Seda from the media HETK on how Russian gold is evading international sanctions via Armenia. We looked at who were the companies in Armenia who were buying this gold. Some of them were just shell companies, while buying gold worth hundreds millions of dollars. Some were related to some local oligarchs or politicians.
And when you follow the trail, the usual suspects begin to surface from the shadows. One after another, they established new companies with a timing that defies coincidence. All these entities emerged between 2022 and 2023, positioned to exploit a gold trade corridor that would soon serve as the hidden wallet of sanctioned Russian networks. The newly established companies quickly began importing vast quantities of Russian gold. In just 2 years, newly formed companies belonging to 10 Armenian families imported more than $4 billion of Russian gold. The new gold imports soon surfaced in Armenia's official customs data. A review of the publicly available Armenian customs data reveals that Russian gold was entering Armenia physically, clearing its customs gates in plain sight, leaving behind a trail of evidence impossible to deny.
According to the Armenian Customs Service, the country sharply increased its gold imports in 2023, and in the first half of 2024, it reached $4.4 billion, about 66 tons.
This volume of gold is far beyond anything Armenia could possibly absorb. Logic dictates that Armenia was never the final destination, only a waypoint on a much larger route.
The gold came from Russia to Armenia, and after that the paperwork was changed as if it was produced in Armenia, and it was exported to UAE.
Armenia is a landlocked country, surrounded entirely by other nations with no access to the sea, which leaves only one practical way for Russian gold to exit the country: by air. At the center of this entire operation stands a single choke point, Zvartnots International Airport. The airport is operated by CJSC, a company belonging to the Argentina-based Corporation America Airports Group. At the top of that empire stands Eduardo Ernequian, an Argentine-Armenian billionaire whose reach extends across continents. But CJSC carries a tainted record. In 2017, the company was implicated in a scheme involving forged Schengen visas and the facilitation of illegal migration, exposing vulnerabilities far deeper than the public ever realized. An examination of the official records made public on the CJSC's website reveals a striking detail between 2022 and 2024. The cargo volume of Zvartnots International Airport doubled, rising from 24,000 tons to 46,000 tons. The 2024 activity report of CJSC shows that most of this cargo was transported as belly cargo, meaning it was loaded into the storage holds beneath commercial aircrafts. The carriers behind this flow of cargo remain unclear, but the pattern points repeatedly to one airline, Flyone Armenia. Just like the Armenian firms implicated in the illicit gold trade, Flyone Armenia also began its operations in 2022. Independent investigations suggest that the airline is closely linked to the Sukiasan network. And Sukiasan himself is listed among the owners of Yerevan Jewelry Factory, a company reported to have imported hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Russian gold. A closer look at Flyone Armenia's UAE routes exposes several unusual patterns. On 11 May 2023, one of its aircraft took off from Yerevan bound for Dubai with just 37 passengers on board. Additional allegations suggest that Flyone Armenia modified the flight codes on specific operations. What was Flyone Armenia trying to hide?
We know that the amount of gemstones and precious stones that Armenia ultimately re-exported to other countries is far above its domestic production. Armenia could not have, under any conceivable circumstance, produced that amount of gemstones and exported to any other country.
Between 2022 and 2024, official Armenian customs figures show a dramatic transformation. From exporting almost no gold at all to the UAE before 2022, Armenia suddenly started to ship $5 billion worth within just 2 years. This is how the operation is sealed. Sanctioned Russian gold reaches the international market through Armenia. In this chain, Armenia becomes an indispensable partner in financing Russia's war.
The first wave of re-export was blessing for all the business in Armenia because all the business, banking sector, experts and others gained from this. The second wave, we didn't see like a lot of paperwork on this. It was hidden, and a few people gained from this, not the whole economy. But it was registered as growth as well, which raises questions.
The one conclusion that you can draw from all of these businesses is that they were meant to be for Russian elites.
And there are companies which are backed by Armenian oligarchs and politicians who are part of this entire scheme, which also raises legitimate questions whether the Armenian government is aware or somehow protects this entire business.
The political questions here are that this is a payment, can be described as a payment method that came through Armenia. Why through Armenia? For what? This payment method went through Armenia to other countries, and this raises as well as political questions.
So the trade is two ways: banned Western goods, which are sanctioned, going to Russia through, say, Armenia, Georgia, and Russian goods going out, like diamond, golds, and other expensive raw materials going out from Russia through Armenia to the West.
Thank you.
Building on our fruitful political cooperation, it is high time we foster our economic collaboration, promote trade, and look into expanding our partnership in mobility.
Pashinyan, unfortunately, in the case of Armenia, is trying to play both sides. Is trying to be, trying to talk about joining Europe. Maybe Mr. Pashinyan doesn't understand that no country can be in two customs unions. Armenia is already in the Eurasian Economic Union. To go from there to the European Union, he has to first leave the Putin's Eurasian Economic Union. So he has to do Brexit. And I don't think Putin allows Brexit.
If we are speaking economically, it would be much more harder for Armenia to further itself from Russia right now than it was in 2018, because we have stronger economical and other ties with Eurasian Economic Union.
We see that on the one hand, Armenia tried to vote in United Nations, for example, against Russian aggression, that Armenia has a lot of statement to support Ukraine in this war, but on the other hand, we see that Armenia is one of the big transitional hub for Russia for supply of different goods, also for Russia military-industrial complex.
It's ambiguity, because one day they say something, while the other day the other thing, and they are like presenting or like advertising the road to European Union, but the market is the other story. This is the political ambiguity.
Armenia have good relationship with Russia and with the Iranian, the same team, and the Armenian trying to influence and to help both this state, Russia and the Iranian, because they want one day the same thing maybe could change. They need Russia help him, because they have good relationship together.
This is a complex threat, and those regimes are helping each other. We can see this clearly. They're sharing the technology. Russia is propping Iranian regimes with technology.
Armenia also has to look about the future, And I think if I'm looking about the future, if I am the leader of Armenia, I'm have to be in good relationship in all the region, of course, with the West side. Because the West side is legitimate that Armenia be in it, but not with Iranian, with the Russian.
I don't think that we've developed a mechanism and instruments that would clearly send a signal that especially those countries who are willing to become part of Europe, such as, for example, Armenia, the way that it looked, we meet, we talk, there's a grave concern, it is not nice that this is happening, but then not much is changing.
I also welcome the measures that Armenia has taken against the circumvention of our sanctions against Russia, in particular to make sure that lethal equipment and technologies do not end up in the hands of Russian military. This shows that the European Union and Armenia are increasingly aligned in values and interests.
Why are some countries ignored in their illegal activities? I think it's a mixture of factors. In the case of Armenia, they have two very powerful diasporas, one in France and one in the United States. The United States was always, in many ways, particularly under President Biden and President Obama, was biased towards Armenia in the conflict in the South Caucasus. France is openly biased towards Armenia. So they're not going to impose sanctions on Armenia because this has domestic repercussions, in terms of voting, because I think most of the Armenians in the United States, for example, are Democratic supporters.
There is a reluctance on the side of the Western institutions to impose any sanctions on Armenia.
Nobody in Brussels, for example, says to Prime Minister Pashinyan, you cannot join the European Union if you continue this corruption.
If they impose sanctions and they cannot enforce them, this sends a message of weakness. And I'm sorry to put it so frank, but we think it's a clear that they need to be credible when they threaten sanctions, and when they impose them, they need to be serious about how they enforce them.
Countries like Armenia face a huge challenge. They have very close trading relationships with Russia historically. And so the question is, are they going to invest the resources in increasing the way in which they scrutinize trade that leaves their countries?
Since the invasion of Ukraine, Armenia's trade volume with Russia has increased by more than 400%, according to official data and investigations by Insider and Head, a local think tank. In your view, does this indicate that Armenia is playing a central role in the broader network enabling Russia to circumvent Western sanctions?
So countries like Armenia find themselves caught in the middle. I think generally speaking, those countries have been hearing from Western diplomats for more than 3 years. I think they understand what they need to try to do. At the same time, they're caught in this kind of tussle between Western sanctions and the GRU from Russia.
Western governments have so far taken absolutely no measures in terms of curbing Armenia's reliance on Russian economy, Armenia's role in helping Russian economy circumvent sanctions levied against it.
It's surprising when it comes to Armenia also, because it increased its import of precious metals and stones by whopping 200%, new vehicles by 100%.
From Russia?
Yes. Iron and steel by 76%, machinery and mechanical devices by 52%, and technical and medical equipment by 42%. So Ukrainians told us that these, for instance, tools not only stay in Armenia, but they find their way to Russia.
I'm not saying that places like Armenia and Georgia are not being abused for circumvention, but I think Armenia is like a very, very, very small problem, if it's a problem at all.
The reaction to Armenia's role in helping Russia has been subdued. The view is that Armenia's role is important, but it's not that important. There are some other big actors involved.
We basically, looking at the data and then trying to understand how Russia is supporting its war machine. So, for instance, when you look at trade patterns, Armenia is suddenly importing for more luxury cars and EU tech than its domestic market could reasonably absorb. So how strong of a red flag is this for you?
Well, it depends then where that trade is going onwards afterwards. I think this is the point, right? So there's a Sky News journalist that are you recording again?
Yeah.
Okay. So
some organizations are trying to diminish Armenia's role by usually comparing the numbers of Armenia-Russia trade volumes with those of Iran, North Korea, or China. But this comparison is misleading and does not actually give us a full picture. Any help to Russia should be documented, and any companies or governments which are part of these sanction evasion networks should be held accountable.
Экономическое сотрудничество за прошлый год, рост товарооборота составил очень значимую величину, причем в значительной степени это связано с увеличением импорта, если от вас, а экспорта армянского в нашу сторону. Существенно и товарооборот достиг более чем 7 миллиардов долларов. Такого объема в наших торгово-экономических связях никогда раньше не было.
Anybody who is externally helping Russia's war machine is implicit in supporting this illegal full-scale war against Ukraine, which is killing Ukrainian civilians.
Armenia's role is more about being actively involved and benefiting. Therefore, complicity in a moral sense is undoubtedly there. But the reactions to this have been very subdued.
I think the enabling of Russia's military machine, certainly. There should be as tough sanctions as the ones on Russia. Armenia should be told that you cannot join the European Union if you continue to help Russia.
We are experts in economic statecraft, in economic disruption of military supply chains, and we need, from that specific perspective, to consider the role of third countries that are helping Russia to cope with those disruptions, to maintain the military industry. In our organization, we think that's a direct involvement into the full-scale invasion against Ukraine.
Can we clearly say that Armenia profited from the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
I don't like how that question is formed because it raises some ethical questions, but if directly and in one word, then yes. Indirectly, but yes.
Does it make Armenia complicit in crimes committed against Ukrainians by Russia?
Business is business. No. As much as other countries. So if I say yes, then other European Unions will be in this bucket as well.
My message would be to those countries who allow Russia to avoid sanctions is that if they have European aspirations, that it is incompatible. You cannot hurt Europe and be with Europe.
To mitigate the risks, not only economical but political, Armenian government should be more honest to itself, to its people, and to its partners. Not only to European partners, but to Russia.
Europe and Armenia should become friends, and then Armenia doesn't have to be Putin's friend.
He's trying to be too cynical, too hypocritical. What he should be doing is ending Armenia's support for Russia by allowing this re-export of Western sanctioned goods. He should be saying, we are leaving the Eurasian Economic Union and we are trying to join the European Union. Then I would treat him as a serious, not cynical politician. But at the moment, he's trying to sit on two chairs, and eventually two chairs will fall apart.
And my message is that they need to decide, finally, if they are supporting the aggressive war against Ukraine waged by the Russian Federation, or they are developing their economies, they are developing their industries, they are maintaining their connections with the Western world.
War in Ukraine is a test case for the entire world to prove that barbarity will not be allowed to defeat justice. It's a test case for all of these countries. And within that scheme, there's a great deal of responsibility to be assumed, not just by Western countries, but also relatively smaller countries helping Russia at this historic juncture.
Basically, Ukrainians are suffering because of this. The war is continuing. It's a forever war. Russia is increasing its attacks. And it could only do this with external support.
Do not support Russian war machine. We tell our partners Russia currently expands its defense industry quicker than the Soviet Union expanded its defense industry at any point during the Cold War. And this should be an alarm bell for every capital in the West to understand that they are not sanctioning Russia to simply support Ukraine. They're sanctioning Russia to slow down this machine of terror and death and prevent it from actually threatening their countries and their citizens and their communities, their families.
Да, я хочу, щоб почув всі страни. Але лучше, як приїжджають люди сюди, бачать, вони нам більш сочувствують. Ті, що тут бачать, що